Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hello everyone, a very good evening. My name is Urvashi Aneja. I'm one of the co-founders and directors of Tandem Research. Delighted to be here to be moderating this session on regulating the digital economy. So at Tandem Research, for the past 18 months, we've been closely examining the role of big tech companies in India. We know big tech companies have an enormous amount of market power and that this has increased as a result of the pandemic. While countries and companies around the world are struggling to stay afloat, big tech companies are hiring new people, making new acquisitions, and generating new sources of revenue. But also globally, we see a huge backlash against big tech companies, from the antitrust hearings earlier this year to the latest suit by the FTC against Facebook a few days ago. And the issue extends beyond market impacts to individual rights and freedoms. It has been argued, for an example, that Facebook's dominance has enabled it to dilute privacy standards for its users. In our work, we also similarly argue that the issue is bigger than just market power. Rather, we see big tech companies as exerting civic power in society. So they have the power to command attention, to influence elections, to shape public opinion. So market dominance has enabled big tech companies to play a civic role in our society. And the stakes are much higher for developing countries like India. Big tech companies are not just providing enterprise solutions or products and services that might enhance consumer convenience, but they're actually a critical part of India's development story. They're filling gaps in both state and market capacity. Yet we have few ways to hold them accountable. Indian parliamentarians, for an example, cannot summon Mark Zuckerberg as much as we try. And we don't see Facebook employees in India going on strike unless certain policy changes are made. So regulating big tech companies is critical, with a view not just towards healthy markets, but also healthy democracy. And so there's a lot at stake when we regulate the digital economy. It's, again, not just about markets. And a portfolio of strategies are needed. And as we do so, and as India thinks about what these portfolios of strategies are for regulating the digital economy and regulating big tech, we also need to ensure that the policies that are targeted at global big tech do not disproportionately impact smaller players. We also need to make sure that as we try to rein in the power of global big tech companies, we do not enable the rise of domestic big tech companies as well. We must ensure healthy competitive markets. So I'm really delighted to have this opportunity to discuss these issues and more with both Mr. Sharma and Mr. Pai. Thank you both very much for joining us. Mr. Sharma, so perhaps I can start with you. Consumer welfare in terms of competition policy has typically been understood in terms of price. And consumer welfare defined in terms of price has been the key consideration for regulating competition in India. Do we need new metrics for the digital economy? Do we need to find ways to update competition policy or adapt competition policy for the digital economy? Is India's current competition policy fit for purpose?
Well, let me begin by saying and agreeing with you that the kind of bad behavior which these digital big tech companies have exhibited, you are right, extends to various fields. They basically kill, they copy, they acquire, they kill competition and stifle competition. So I think, and they wriggle out of any kind of laws, regulations, and I remember one where we tried to have the net neutrality in the TRAI, and at that time we enacted a law which talked about non-discriminatory kind of behavior, non-discriminatory pricing pattern for accessing internet, and the Facebook had come with a product called Free Basics, and we wanted to sort of say that Free Basics should not create walled gardens in the internet. Internet must remain a free platform, especially for a country like India, for us to innovate. That should remain like that. But then they put all their might and they spent a huge amount of money on advertisement, lobbying, and whatnot to kind of ensure that we don't sort of enact that regulation. So we have seen this behavior that they are able to, kind of lobby and create situations where they wriggle out of any kind of laws or regulation to regulate them. So that's one problem. The other issue is that you are very right that thus far the regulation have always, focused on the price. Whether you are selling a product, for example, in telecom, what is the rate, what is the tariff, and whether these tariffs are non-discriminatory, whether they are transparent, and whether they are, non-predatory and stuff like that. And that's actually the competition law also talks about non-predation. Now, what happens is that, when you have no price, when you are selling things free, then you are the product. The consumer is the product in some sense. You are actually monetizing his or her data to create value, to add value, and that's how you are working. So therefore, we really have no concept of regulation, whether in terms of competition or whether in terms of other regulatory sort of domains where we regulate something which is free. So that's one part. Secondly, I think what we don't have is essentially our legal system is geared to all physical world. This is a virtual borderless world in which we have not updated or upgraded, or probably we have not been able to come to grips with this problem of this virtual borderless world. So that's another problem. So we lack actually law. Then of course the internet stuff. The problem of law, and then what happens is that we even today we don't have the data protection law, for example. We have no law which can limit the power of these companies to collect data. They collect huge amount of data. Even forget about the big tech companies. Other companies also, when they do this part. Secondly, we have net neutrality for the telcos, but we have no neutrality for the platforms, for the operating system, for the devices. And all these big tech companies control all the three. They control. They have operating systems. They control. They are the whole huge producers of devices, and also the app stores and play stores, and they actually can block anybody from the play stores. The Paytm was blocked by Google. There are many examples. Google has said that some languages will not be promoted. So I think we really need some way to check these kinds of behaviors. Now, what has happened is that these behaviors are being checked in the European countries, for example, by fines or by other kinds of things. I don't think this is like controlling symptoms. This is not controlling the disease, so to say. So I think current situation is that the big tech companies are having a more or less a free play. We don't have adequate laws or regulations to control them. And we need those systems to put in place, and I think we have to think of situations and think of solutions which go beyond the these fines or other things. So that I think we'll talk about later as we go along in the discussion.
Great, thank you. Maybe I can a follow-up question to that. So, what could be some of the options available to India to regulate these companies? I mean, in the US now we're talking about the breaking up of these companies, right? Splitting up, for an example, Facebook from Instagram or Facebook from WhatsApp. What are the kind of options available to the Indian regulator to be able to check the growing power and influence of these companies? And to that, I'd like to add a caveat, right? Which is that I do think they do bring benefits as well, right? I do think that we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? So how do we preserve some of the benefits and address the harms?
No, that's a very good question, and I think that also brings us to the other part of the sort of solution, so to say. So one is we need strong data protection laws, and the data protection laws must actually include how you use the user's data, how do you use the consumer's data, whether you have his consent, and whether you have and he should have the power to control his or her data. So basically, we have a policy in India called DEPA, which is Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture. This should be applied to these companies, so that they're, of course, privacy preserving, consent. They should have minimal data collection policies. That most importantly, we must enforce data portability, because one of the ways in which it has the companies have grown bigger and bigger and bigger is essentially, one is non-interoperability. There's no data portability, so only one player survives. It's the winner takes all situation. And another is that they have a huge network effect, and because of that, they keep on like a balloon. They keep on growing and growing and growing. So I think we have to enforce that data portability so that other players can get in. It's a free and fair competition. That's also important. So we have to enforce data portability. And as I said, net neutrality to be extended to devices, operating systems, application platforms, so that they do not become the gatekeepers of the internet, and they do not stifle competition. After all, Google blocking Paytm is actually, they are promoting their own. This is actually equivalent to promoting. So they become the players on the platform, and also the platform owners. That's actually very, very unethical. So and India has the policy relating to open APIs, open standards, open source, and we need to enforce these policies. And lastly, I think what is important is, rather than killing, or rather than actually destroying or doing some kind of penalty kind of situation, we should design our own open protocols which are inclusive, and which can enable open, free and fair competition for digital companies. That will actually enable that, along with data portability, will enable other platforms to develop. You see, why telecom has not become a monopoly? Why it has not become a monopoly? Because you have very strong interoperability provisions, interconnection rules. That means you have to cooperate in actually completing the call of the other operator. You have to collaborate and you have to cooperate. You have to help him. Otherwise, only I will be able to call my operator, fellows. So this interoperability or interconnectivity or portability, whatever you call it, is also an extremely important condition. So I think these are some of the things. Of course, there will be many. It's a long debate as to what needs to be done, because it's not a simple problem, and it has become a very, very complex problem now, and things have gone beyond, as you say rightly, the competition and the money and the revenue. It has gone to data surveillance and data misuse and political kind of lobbying and other political power. So I think influencing elections, etc. So it's a bit of a complex problem.
No, definitely, and certainly not one that we are going to solve on this short chat. But thank you for that. I mean, I think the point about data portability is really important. But I think one of the challenges also, when you have the market dominance of a few companies, is that it's hard for other companies to arise to whom you will port your data. So one of the things that might also be needed along with data portability is platform interoperability. So to enable newcomers to enter the market.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mr. Pai, perhaps I can turn to you now. So, I think the question is also, we're talking about the digital economy and regulating the digital economy. And, because the big tech actors are so big, conversations about the digital economy are often dominated by these big tech actors, right? So do we need different rules for big tech companies? So the EU has introduced the idea of internet gatekeepers. In the UK, they're planning to use the concept of strategic market status. And other scholars in other places have suggested that big tech companies should be considered as an infrastructure and therefore as essential facilities providers. So what would you agree, and what would be some of the policy implications if we start thinking of these companies as utility providers?
Well, Urvashi, I think the big difference about big tech and the digital world is that we are in the digital revolution. Our laws and regulations are that of the industrial revolution. The industrial revolution created a global supply chain where you had market monopolies and market domination using price and products, right? Now you've got platforms and networks. The industrial revolution never envisaged this kind of a network which moves at the speed of light. So you have global networks which can be done very easily in a short period of time. And the world, including all legislators, all lawyers, don't understand this very well. In the meantime, it has become a big multi-hydra beast. All right. And look at what is happening. You have these big platforms where all of us have become pieces of data. They can manipulate your minds. They can feed you information they want. They can take away our rights. They can make us behave in a particular manner. They interfere in elections. They interfere in stifle competition. They create their own networks where you have to be part of their own network and their operating system. Otherwise, you're out of business. And worst of all, they can shut you down. Now, do we have laws to counter all this? We don't have laws to counter all this because people just don't know what to do. So my suggestion is we need a global protocol like we had for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We need a Universal Declaration of Digital Rights at the global level under the UN, where we write down very clearly that every citizen should have equal and fair access to platforms and networks. And every citizen should have the right of privacy protected. Every nation should have sovereignty over the people's data. And contracts cannot dominate relationship. There have to be laws to dominate relationship. Today, when you work with Google or Facebook or with Apple, you sign a sign something and say, I consent. Have you read the document? Have you read the contract? I don't know if anybody read the contract. It's one-sided. A contract cannot protect you, cannot save you. We need national government. We need the courts to save us. So we have to come out with new regulations. We have to come out with this. And sadly, big tech has become so big that they think that they have a right to a natural monopoly, and they're beyond reason. They have money, they have networks, the ability to influence, and they're misusing the power all over. And sadly, many of them are run by juveniles who do not understand the import of what they're doing. They think it's fun and games. And what they do with artificial intelligence and machine learning is even worse. Because to me, we have never seen in the world before the ability of any platform to influence the thought and minds of millions and millions of people in an instant. For example, when you search, the platform sends you what it wants you to see based on the money that it's making. So this is the challenge, like Mr. Sharma said. The world doesn't have any norms. So we must start looking at a new set of laws. One of them could be to declare them as utilities. But if you declare them as utilities, we need a global compact. Now, globally, if you see, China has got its own firewall. China takes care of itself. It's a totalitarian state. You cannot come in, you cannot go out. And the United States is very happy because all the data resides there. The NSA of the United States has access to the data of the entire world, including all our political leaders. They don't want anything. EU is now creating a wall just to safeguard its interest, and they're going after people. Now, India can do that because of Aadhaar, because size of economy, and we're lost. What about the African continent? What about South America? What about Southeast Asia? So globally, this is a problem. So there requires a global solution. And I think we have to look at solutions like having them as utilities, interoperability, inter-platforms, inter-nuances, protection, like Mr. Sharma said, that the data belongs to the individual. And we need sovereign governments and regulators to protect the data and create the rules of engagement. And the rules of engagement have to be laid down very, very clearly. Now, the last point I want to make is, will all this stifle innovation? Now, we must remember these platforms have created great innovation. They allowed small companies to come on the platform, use the technology, given them access to millions of people at a very low cost. They also made money. So they have fostered innovation. They created an innovation system. But today they become so big that they are stifling innovation because they can shut out people who compete with them. Like Mr. Sharma said, if I'm an operator and a provider of services, others come on my platform and they provide the same service, I can shut them down. And that's what they're doing. They're misusing the power of the platform. So there is an internal contradiction, and there's a stifling of competition, and there has to be a separation of work between the platform and the services they provide, so that many more people can provide services and the platform can become utilities. So we need new regulations, fresh thought, and new ways of doing it. And we need a global compact, because without a global compact, things can easily escape. For example, Facebook can shut off a whole country. Google can shut off a whole country. Apple, iOS can shut off a whole country. Then what happens? They may lose a few $1 million, but what happens to millions of people in that country? So we are facing the most critical challenge after the Second World War in managing people's rights all over the world.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I think you raise a number of really interesting points, right? And I'd like to pick up on a few of them. I mean, I think when we're often talking about the digital economy, we work under the assumption that we are in a new arena. It's a new space and new sets of regulations are needed, right? So we tend to focus, for an example, on the issue of data, on the issue of network effects, on interoperability, etc. But there is another school of thought that says that, well, in that big tech label, let's not focus on the tech. Let's focus on the big. If we look at how many of these companies have risen to dominance, a lot of them are old school kind of techniques, right? You have a lot of money being put into lobbying. You enable those network effects. You become infrastructure through mergers and acquisitions. So how much of this is unique to the digital economy, and how much of this is about monopolistic practices that exist in the traditional economy carrying forward to the digital economy?
Well, monopolistic practices are inherent in business. Let's not wish it away. They're inherent in business, they'll remain in business. Because if a business is successful, it makes money, it will try to dominate and stifle competition. That's the nature of the beast. Now you're seeing it in the digital world. It was there in the physical world. We learned how to do it through the Antitrust Act in the US, and we learned how to do it against Microsoft in the earlier era when we prevented them having the browser, etc. We learned to do it. And then we came out with laws in the United States to say that this is bad for innovation, let us not do it. So innovation became the key on which regulations fell apart in the digital world. Now we allow them to become giants. Now they become so big. Big tech has become extremely big. And the behavior of big tech is accentuating the problem because the behavior is becoming anti-democratic. The behavior is becoming more monopolistic, more control-oriented. It's becoming like China. Now, if Facebook is a totalitarian state like China without the rules and laws and international regulations, Apple has become like a global giant, right? Because please remember, they are supranational. You are 2 or 3 nations. Facebook has more people on its platform. It controls more people than China does or India does. And we are very, very large countries, right? And Apple is equally much more valuable at $2 trillion than any company on this planet. So what do you do with all this kind of thing? The network impact, the digital world, the lack of regulations, the need to have more innovation has allowed them to come and they become multi-hydra beasts. And now I think we have to sit together and work together. Is a combination of bad behavior, the network impact, enormous amount of money, the scale impact coming into play because the marginal cost is very less. What is the marginal cost for anybody to come on a platform? Almost zero, right? Now, for commodities in the old world, there was a marginal cost. There was a fixed cost. What is the fixed cost for somebody to come? Now, just imagine, Urvashi, you are shut out of the network. How will you live your life? You are on Google, you are on Facebook, you communicate, you are on Twitter. You are shut out of everybody for whatever reason. What happens to you? You are left out. It's become a necessity like the air we breathe, like the water we drink, right? Now, that is the fear and that is the domination that is there. It is something we've never seen in the industrial era. We've never seen in our lives. And it's getting bigger and bigger every single day. And it's out of control. So that's why it's very important to sit down in a global conclave, work out all the best practices, look at what is happening in the world, and look at and come out with new regulations and make them behave. If you have to break them up, break them up. Because for you to create an Apple like Google is well nigh impossible. Let's understand that very clearly, right? The only thing that happened, only thing is the counter is in India, where Aadhaar and the iSpirit people who created the India stack have created a public utility which Mr. Sharma knows about very well and did it very well, where everybody can come and is well regulated and run by a public body. That could be the model, but it's too late for the day. So we need to come out with new norms.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, one of the things that we have argued in our work is actually that, big tech is not a static set of companies, that it's a concept. And it's a concept that's marked by data, it's marked by network effects, it's marked by infrastructure, and it's marked by its civic role. And so what that then means is that other companies can join big tech, just as as the companies that exist today can drop out of the big tech label, right? So it's very important that we don't only focus on a specific set of companies, but the broader phenomenon, because we could have other companies, domestic or otherwise, that replicate much of that same bad behavior. Mr. Sharma, a question for you. In the absence of a global regulatory overhaul, some countries across the world are introducing digital taxation norms to regulate the activities of big tech firms. To maintain uniformity and to establish a level playing field for all tech companies, is a global agreement on taxation of the digital economy better than implementation of digital taxes at a national level? How do you weigh these two?
Well, I don't think really that levying taxes or creating taxation policies for big tech companies separately is the solution to the problem. The problem is actually the problem of too much accumulation of power. And as you know, data is what they have, and they can control, as Mr. Pai rightly, said, they can control our minds, they can control our behaviors, and they are really too big, and they are. For example, a country like India, they will probably listen in some sense. But there are very small countries. There nobody talks to those small countries. We have seen countries coming together on various platforms in international fora, and they are crying, saying that we can't even talk to the country representative of the Facebook or Google or whatever. So actually, they have become very arrogant. Also, let me put it this way: they become extremely arrogant. And I have personally seen their behavior in some of the ways they have huge battery of lawyers, they have huge power in terms of money and advertisement and lobbying. So it's very difficult just by Having a compact on taxes and policies globally will not solve the problem. Yes, I agree with Mr. Pai that if there is a global compact as to how, and there is a global agreement as to how we regulate and how we control and how we, solve this problem, that's fine. But I'm afraid whether such regulation will be possible or not, because there are various facets and approaches to this. Europeans are doing talking and crying because they don't have any of such, they don't own any of these big platforms.
Yeah.
And Americans are very happy that they are the owners of all the platforms. I'm not sure whether it will happen, but yes, this is the way to go about it, because no individual country will be able to solve this problem. However, fortunately for us, we are very big, number one. Number two, we have created products which are public utilities, which are public goods, and which are delivering. We have created digital identity platform like nowhere else in the world. In fact, we are the first one who reached 1 billion strength in a year, or in a matter of 5.5 years. Not even Google, Facebook, nobody did that, or Windows, Microsoft did that. We have created UPI, which clocked 2 billion transactions. So we have the experience and expertise now in building big tech, big platforms. And these are public utilities. They are public utilities, and these platforms have another part. They are frugal, they are interoperable, they are scalable, they are actually, very, very cost effective, and they are inclusive, most importantly. So I think if you have all the attributes of these big public utilities which we have created, I think if we think on those lines, that we regulate these entities not on the taxation per se, but we regulate them on the basic principles of data protection. Whom does the data belong to? Data empowerment, portability, interoperability, whatever you call them. And I agree with Mr. Pai that interoperability of platforms also. And of course, neutrality of the devices, operating system, that I think the net neutrality principle must be extended to them. So these should be some of the remedial measures to control their powers on the one hand, and on the other hand, let us grow. I'm not saying that we'll be able to create a Google or a Facebook in our country, but at least we will be able to provide the digital utilities for our people, so that they can carry on their lives. They don't get shut down just because somebody decides to shut it. UPI, the interface which we have provided, I think is so inclusive, anybody can just get in. And that's how we should create such kind of inclusive platform. So I think the solution lies in not having a taxation policy, but in creating laws. And actually, I completely agree, and I also made that point, that unfortunately, our legal system has been made for a, for example, in our legal lexicon, there is a word called place of occurrence. Now, place of occurrence plays an extremely important role. Where the murder took place, what is the place of occurrence? That decides as to where, whose thana or whose police station that particular case will be registered. Now, what is a place of occurrence in an internet kind of event? Whether it is Siberia or some proxy server somewhere in Chile, who knows? So this whole concepts have actually, the virtual world, the digital world concepts are completely different, qualitatively different from the physical worlds, and therefore the legal system also has to be tuned in. But I think we should be able to grapple this problem, because what we have done, and I think we have brought policies in place, and we should go ahead with our data protection laws, with our things. Unfortunately, data protection law also has been in the making since last 10 years. Believe me, in 2010, May, we had written, Mr. Randan Nilekani had written to the then Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, saying that the country, we are actually doing everything which we can do in Aadhaar to protect privacy, but we need a larger framework law in the country for data protection. And that law has been, in the making, and last 2 years the committee has submitted a report, and it's still lying. I think we need to go very quickly, because digital world is not waiting like a physical world, 3 years or 4 years. You have to have it on the, there are things happening in real time, so to say. And real time means real time, split second, microseconds. So that's, I think, is the solution. That's in my view. Of course, we can't find a solution, as you rightly said, in this small chat.
No, no, we can't find a solution in this small chat. We are actually out of time, unfortunately. I think we could have gone on speaking for a really long time. Thank you both very, very much for sharing your views and your thoughts. I think a lot for us to think about, a lot for the audience to think about. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to the audience, and have a great evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Urvashi.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.